GLaDOS is perhaps the most famous rogue AI in video games, but long before I played Portal, I was facing off against an AI antagonist that absolutely terrifies me in a way that GLaDOS doesn't: Shodan. While there is some humor in GLaDOS's horror, Shodan is a terrifying megalomaniac that revels in genetic experiments and creating cyborg monstrosities, while demanding her subjects worship her as a god. System Shock is a first-person adventure game that has been painstakingly recreated by brilliant retro resurrectors Nightdive Studios. In it, you play as a hacker who is forced to fight their way through Citadel Station after the station's AI went rogue. It's not just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, though. You're the reason Shodan's leash is unhooked. It's your job to undo this damage as you find yourself trapped on a Citadel Station controlled by Shodan, who has filled its cramped corridors with mutants, cyborgs, and robots bent on destroying or enslaving you. Body horror abounds in System Shock, now in shiny new high definition, where once the denizens of Citadel Station were depicted in highly pixelated gore, you can now see the fruit of Shodan's carnage in a whole new way. But even with System Shock's graphical overhaul, Nightdive Studios left a bit of pixelated retro feel in their art. If you get really close to an object, the textures are pixelated in a way that feels like a deliberate art choice by the developers. This helps maintain that retro feel, while being able to keep the modern graphical bells and whistles you'd expect. While the graphics have changed significantly, there's also been obvious care put into System Shock's gameplay. It feels like a modern game, while remaining surprisingly faithful to its original's design. And that means this is a true retro adventure. There's absolutely no hand-holding, so you have to pay attention to dialogue and the environment to find your next task. There are no waypoints. You can reference dialogue snippets that you find as you explore Citadel Station and discover audio logs left from the deceased crew, which may also help, but otherwise, you're on your own. There's also little to no explanation on the game's mechanics, so if you're not familiar with this type of game, the learning curve might be frustrating, especially because there's a real possibility you can play yourself into a corner that you can't get out of easily. If you don't save often enough, or if you lose track of an important game item, you can lose chunks of time. I found myself going back to my old habit of saving frequently and creating a new save file each time I saved so I can go back in case I get stuck and make wiser choices the next time around. System Shock comes from an age of corridor shooters and feels only one step removed from a grid-based dungeon crawler. What I mean by that is, most of the game takes place in a cramped environment. You can argue that this is appropriate for a space station, but it does make System Shock feel labyrinthine and claustrophobic, but more in a hard-to-navigate way than in a scary way. In fact, despite Shodan's threats and the prodigious amounts of gore, System Shock isn't a very scary game. It does achieve a cyberpunk sci-fi atmosphere, but the hacker you play as feels very capable of handling the threats that Shodan produces. Once I got a laser rapier, and the boots that let me run super fast and nearly fly, I felt like Shodan should be afraid of me. System Shock is definitely one of the most authentically cyberpunk games I've played in a long time. Even the original game's infamous cyberspace hacking segments are recreated in bright neon colors that evoke the feeling of flying through the net and compromising systems in a way that 90s popular media promised us. While System Shock contains some frustrating elements for the uninitiated, fans of the original will absolutely love this remake. It's even more accessible to modern audiences if they possess a little patience to weather the 90s video game design. This is my favorite game of its type since 2017's Prey, and an absolutely worthy remake to a 90s sci-fi video game classic. Thanks for watching. We are Culture Combine.